All right. Well, happy Monday afternoon. Thanks for hopping on with us today. My name is Jeffrey. I live in the West Cobb, Cartersville, Rome, Calhoun, Northwest Georgia, Northwest Atlanta market. We're going to dive into some statistics today. I got Rick Hale joining us. Rick, how are you, sir?
Awesome. Awesome.
Good
Thank
deal.
you.
Brett's going to be hopping on in just a little bit for us. So we are on the cusp of coming off of Mega Camp, which kind of shared with us a lot of what we're already feeling. And that is the shift. And I would be probably safe to say, and Rick, you could agree with me, the shift has already kind of happened. We're still shifting, but we're feeling it. We've all, a lot of us can like pinpoint back to an exact day where things kind of felt this way. Buyers felt it immediately. Agents felt it kind of part way. Sellers, it's finally catching up with them. So it took them a few weeks to realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to have 90 people knocking down my door wanting my house at the price I'm offering it. So we're feeling that. But what we wanted to do today was to have an intellectual conversation about where the market actually is and what we're going to be doing to navigate that and walk through that. So I'm going to pull up some stats for us. I want to dive into, because we're nailing the Northwest Georgia area. I'm going to share my screen with you. Let's see. And Rick, I'm going to rely on you for some help on this. Can y'all see my screen?
I need to make my screen bigger.
I know, like you got to zoom in a little bit on it. So I want to dive into Cobb County numbers if we can first and start there. We can see that the active number actually has dipped down a little bit than it has been the past few weeks, which kind of like looking at the number surprises me a little bit because I thought that listing numbers, active listings would be up. But you can see if you look at it kind of carefully, you know, active under contracts climbing the same, coming soon's climbing the same, pendings-ish. But closed units are up over last week. So, Rick, how do you decipher that in terms of like what we should be expecting?
Well, I mean, there's an element of seasonality in addition to a shift that could play a role and should play a role. So, you know, it's not uncommon that the distraction of kids going back to school and, you know, it's not uncommon that people hold off on listing their homes. So lower active inventory doesn't surprise me. Hopefully it rebounds. And, but anyone with children who also want to transition and buy might be reflected in that buy box where there's an increase there where they close just in time to transition for a new school district. So that's a common theme in the suburbs.
What about, let's dive into Fulton County if we can look at it and see. Move my screen around. I mean, it feels consistent to what was happening in Cobb County a little bit with the numbers. I mean, closings are up quite a bit in Fulton County, but you know, we're feeling a little bit of the same active listing inventory. So Labor Day's coming. How does that play into it? Seasonality, Rick?
Same thing. Distraction. People don't always want people coming through their house when they're on vacation or, you know, or they need prep time and some, you know, so hopefully, again, we see a little bit of a bump in inventory pre-Christmas or pre-real holidays. But it, you know, we'll see. Again, this is a crazy market. There's some real dynamic things going on that impact consumer confidence and perspective.
So I think the number one question, Rick, in Fulton County, is it still a good time to buy or sell real estate?
Absolutely. I mean, at the right price, it's always a good time to buy real estate. I mean, my answer to is it a good time is it's kind of the same thing. You know, it's either today or sometime in the past. And again, but the key question then becomes how long do you intend to hold it and what's your tolerance for risk? And are you buying for strictly investment or is it, you know, an owner occupied experience for your family? Because those dynamics will alter the conversation.
They do. And it impacts both buyer and seller very differently. So being prepped for that. Flipping over to Dekalb County, we're seeing a little bit of the same thing. And it's so interesting to be able to track the numbers across all the multiple counties, which I love about this site, is it lets me see, okay, what's happening in my market, my tiny little area is pretty consistent with what's happening across the whole metro area. So as I'm advising sellers and buyers.
Well, and keep in mind too, that the differential, week over week and month over month, as you glance back, is less than 10%. So, depending on your volume, your business, and the timing and flow of your client, opportunities, this is an irrelevant number at that ratio. But the question then becomes, is this a trend or an anomaly? And that's why we do this.
Yeah. So when you talk about a trend versus anomaly, when we're talking to agents who are working with sellers and buyers, at what point do we say something is a trend?
I mean, the Fed would, 3 quarters in a row of, reduced GDP. And, it depends on what you're gauging is a trend or not. But I think every 90 days you kind of establish a trend and then you overlay it against seasonality. And if you look year over year, that'll give you an idea of whether it's a trend with seasonality taken into consideration too. So this is a little bit of a blind figure in that we're coming straight out of summer or early summer to late summer. The Chuck Carr stats are amazing. Hopefully everybody's still getting those. And what's cool about those is he takes into account seasonality by always doing month over month, year over year, quarter over quarter. So the comparison is really, it takes seasonality out of that, potential misunderstanding. But 1 month would be an anomaly. I would say 3 months starts to look like a trend. 6 months, undeniable.
That's good to know, because if you're a stats kind of person, you can flip to this website and go back and see and look and hone in on specific things. I mean, if you're a listing heavy inventory agent, if you're a listing heavy agent, I can go back and look at active and what's the numbers have been and what's the trend. And if I'm a big buyer's agent, watching the active under contracts and pending. So that's good content, Rick. Thank you for that.
Can I add one more thing? Some other important metrics to consider that he also factors in is days on market. And that's a real indicator of buyer demand and buyer competition. Another is what percentage paid over asking price. I have a feeling, I haven't looked at the last quarters yet, but I have a feeling those numbers are going to start to slide a little bit. People are not as willing to just pay whatever it takes to get a house.
Now, listen, my buyers aren't paying as is, throwing a ton of cash over low appraisal with 2 days due diligence. They're not doing it. It's not happening.
They shouldn't. The market's shifting back into neutral. But even so, I would gander a guess that days on market for the houses that sell, now there's still a third that don't sell typically in every market. So just because, it looks like a robust everyone wins market, it historically hasn't been, even in what's been the best market we've ever experienced in modern time. So people still fail. That's important. The other piece of it is just, again, how long it takes and how many multiple offers. And, again, the consumer confidence is definitely people starting to scrutinize. And this is where I was going. I lost my thought for a second. Average days on market still under 30. I would bet my last dollar right now, well under. And so 6 to 7 months of that, it would be an active inventory amount of time for it to be a blended, balanced market. So the conversation, although it's not the seller's market it's been, this is still a seller's market by every metric.
I mean, there's no way to deny that. And price reductions, and we're going to dive into some of these articles. Brett's with us, but price reductions are happening. And Brett, I'll ask you this. Do you think price reductions are bringing the price of the house back into line, or are they going down? What's your OP big picture perspective?
You got to be careful when you talk pricing, because people want to say that we're going into a price depreciation. But the truth is, the value you sell your house for, the comparison to that of what it would sell a year ago determines if the price appreciated or depreciated. So if I list a house for $500,000 and I reduce the price to $480,000, That doesn't mean that the price actually depreciated. It just means I'm reducing the price in order to sell the house. The house might have been worth $450 a year ago. So it's still an appreciating asset, but you got to be careful where that line is, because I think some people think if they're reducing price, that means the prices are going backwards, which is not necessarily the case.
Well, and prices have to be flat first before they go down. And I think we're just approaching kind of the apex of appreciation.
Right.
I've heard agents at their seller or their listing appointments say, hey, look, I'm going to give you the reality price and I'm going to give you the price that you're interested in receiving. But bottom line, we're going to all fall back into reality. And it's still astronomically above what they would have received 3 years ago on a closing doc. So it's a matter of like actually taking these listing appointments and going in educated to be able to have the conversation, especially when it comes to pricing.
So this is the headline. It's the most confusing market Gary Keller's ever seen in 40 years. If that doesn't speak to all of this. So here we all are trying to figure this out. But here, you got to think about this, like historically low unemployment, pretty doggone historically low days on market. Prices for the most part are still appreciating. And we're selling a lot of houses. And then you got these factors over here, which says, oh, inflation's really high. Oh, the Fed's cranking interest rates. None of it really makes sense because it's not really in line with what you would expect to happen. Yet the real estate market is still thriving. And maybe not thriving like the excess of the pandemic created, but comparatively prior to pandemic, we're in a thriving real estate market, and it doesn't make sense. I mean, we'll talk about it in a minute, but Friday, the Federal Reserve did another rate hike, right? My life and your life and our agent's life, it really hadn't affected us. And they just keep cranking that interest rate. So it's really interesting. What do you make of it?
You know, I try to, I can't keep up with what they're communicating. And so my goal is to be the economist of choice for my clients.
Yeah.
On my real estate agent side business, like, yes, it's super confusing. Yes, I don't know what's coming 6 weeks from now. I can tell you what I think based on numbers, because numbers don't lie. But I just have to continually educate them, Brett. Yeah. I have to stay in front of them with current interest rates based on what my lender's telling me. I have to stay in front of them on what are, 2-to-1 buy downs.
Yeah.
What conversations are actually happening in the real estate market versus what's actually happening on the news. Yeah. I'm being honest. I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but.
Oh, you're fine. Gary was talking about in the CEO Mastermind at Mega Camp last week. He said, you realize we're living in uncertainty. But yet, if you think about past, present, and future, the past is certain because it's already been written. The present is certain because we know what's before us. What's uncertain is the future. And what we have to get good about around the future is we got to get good at predictability and probability. So when you come onto a call like this, and I heard y'all were talking about trends right before I jumped on, so I don't know the whole conversation, but we're looking for a way to create predictability and probability to go win. So you can think of it this way, Jeffrey, if you decided to go farm a neighborhood, I can't give you certainty that you're going to succeed and get the best return on investment, but we know that there's a high probability that you will. Mm-hmm. Or if Rick decided to go all of a sudden become a Zillow agent and spend money on Zillow, I mean, I had to use Rick because he was the other guy on the call here for a minute, but
glad it wasn't me.
Guaranteed. It's not guaranteed. It's not certain, but there's a probability to it. And what we're looking for is, what are the nuggets in the numbers? What are the nuggets in the economics that we can use at a listing table with a seller, or in a buyer consultation, or even our own business, to be able to create some predictability or probability of what's coming in the next 6 to 18 months. And, you know, I heard y'all talking about trends. I think the real estate market right now, 30 days is a healthy trend. So if we're slowing down on inventory, that's a trend right now. I think the inventory is going to continue to slow down a little bit. I think we're seeing what most people would think is seasonality. But I do think the inventory we're only 2 weeks into a little bit of a decline in inventory. But I think it's moving that direction.
Well, like I said, seasonality only matters when you overlay it against last year at the same time. So when we're looking month to month, it's trends, not you can't really denote, you know, whether there's a seasonal shift. And what I think in all of this is the most important part of this are the conversations you're having with yourself, and then the conversations you're having with your clients. The ones with yourself are, can I generate a positive spin and some energy that inspires and motivates me? And if the answer is yes, then get after it. And you should be, because the metrics, the dynamics, you know, April, May, June of 2020, right after the pandemic hit, there's nobody I know on this call or anywhere in the world that wouldn't trade for today right now. When you say the uncertainty, this is way more certain than when we were then. And so it's all circumstantial, number one. Number two, it's mindset. Number three, is there a silver lining or a win in this conversation with yourself first, and then ultimately with your clients? And, you know, is it affordable? Is it enjoyable? And does it make my life better? And if you look at the 100-year trend line for real estate, there's never a bad time to buy real estate. This could be perceived one day the best time to buy real estate. You just don't know. Just enough seller uncertainty, just enough price refreshing or reducing to cause an opportunity to potentially leverage a great buy if you're a savvy agent who knows their market.
And 100%. Rick, on that, as from an agent's perspective, what you were saying, this is a whole lot easier for me to do what I love doing, and that's being a fiduciary to my client, because I can at least understand a little bit of these trends. I'm being honest, 18 months ago, I didn't know how to properly advise a client on what next steps to take and how to move forward. And I mean, we were relearning the real estate game.
Well, but isn't that isn't that the game, Jeffrey?
But I can, yes, relearning, but at least now I can step in and I can actively navigate a conversation based on stats with my buyers and my sellers, and help figure out the why and help them figure out, you know, how they can improve their financial future. Yeah. Whereas before, I feel like a little bit was like just juggling and keeping up, and
panic purchasing and panic decision and under duress and abnormal. That was an abnormal.
It was abnormal.
That experience is not common in real estate. I've been in this since 96, 25 years. So this energy it's been awkward energy. So as we move towards balanced markets, reflective, you can now look at the last 60, 90, 180 days and actually get a good feel for value and not wonder, is it worth 50 over, 100 over, 200? I mean, people were making I would be careful to say irrational, because it was rational in that moment. But one day looking back, some of the decisions made may be perceived a little irrational.
Because I love real estate. I love it so much. And I feel
how would you like to be the predictor of the Fed chair? They keep raising these rates.
No, thank you.
I don't know about you guys, but the interest rates in my world hadn't changed since last week.
I don't want that role. I like my seat over here, but
yeah. So I think it's interesting to observe that even though the Fed is doing these media conversations in the background, which certainly changes consumer mentality, it doesn't necessarily translate directly to mortgage rates. It indirectly does, but not directly. And it's important to understand that.
So how do we figure that out, Brett? How do we learn that? How do we realize? I mean, I know the answer, but I'm just asking, like, how do we advise our agents on seeing what you see in the news, but actually connecting with a legit lender What's the steps?
Yeah, so quit reading the headlines and read the article.
Okay.
The truth's always in the article. The headline is a little bit of a attention grab, right?
Clickbait. Yeah.
And so where's the truth in the article of this conversation? What are mortgage rates today? What were they a week ago? What were they a month ago? What are the predictors of where they're going? And get into the nuts and bolts of the data. Don't get into the emotion, get into the logic. And we've talked about that on this call many times. Like, think about gas prices. They go up, everybody gets emotional, and then we just adjust our life and keep paying for the gas price. Well, interest rates are the same way. There's an emotional response, and then there's the logical approach going forward. Let's shift gears.
Okay.
So Gary Keller article on Inman News says he's got a theory about what a successful agent's day looks like. Rick, you ever heard this? Get it all done by noon.
Yeah, 20 years.
Yeah, it keeps coming back, and obviously it's a success trait. But he's talking about that highly focused morning can help alleviate the anxiety of facing a day's worth of seemingly insurmountable tasks. Perfection is highly overrated. If you can wake up in the morning and control your day before noon, you will have the greatest life possible. I'm throwing that to you, Rick.
I mean, the bottom line is life's full of distraction. And so this is not new information if you've been with Keller Williams for a while.
Right.
And at the same time, I've asked many a classroom where we're talking, lead generation, strategies, scripting for buyers and sellers, how to have the perfect day. There's 15 classes that all circle the same topic. It's do you have a list? Are you motivated? Do you have a compelling conversation in mind? And are you going to make your calls? And there's MREA spells it out clearly. There's a conversion rate with Mets and haven't Mets. And that if you exercise and play the game right, you can't lose. It's impossible. So it used to be 3 hours of lead generation. I think Gary moved it to 4. It might be, I don't know, this year, did he say it should be 5? But before noon, I guess it depends when you start.
His comment today was just this right here is the most critical hours of work day are from when they wake up to roughly noon. And with that time, they should focus largely on lead generation and the other activities that are most likely to result in new buyers and sellers.
So it's the 80-20 rule. It's wake up and nail the 20%, and then the 80 takes care of itself.
Yeah. I want you to be completely obnoxious about controlling that time. We did a whole series on Mojo Monday about the miracle morning. And it's exactly what this is. It's like, do your spiritual time, do your physical fitness time, do your emotional time, and get all that done in the morning. And he almost makes an argument like, who cares what happens in the afternoon if you get all that done in the morning? And he said, you'll live a big life. And it just goes to show this is an age-old time that gets repackaged and repackaged over time. And
can I point out just pause right there on it, Brett. Oh, scroll back up. He says in anxious times, productive activity limits your anxiety. Like the amount of times I have heard agents talk about anxiety and being anxious, and almost even if we were to use the word fearful, replace that with productive activities, not engaging that anxiousness and that fear. And that's very easy to say. But when your production is high and you're doing producing based activities, the anxiety and the fear goes down. I mean, it's psychologically proven. So it's a lot for a stat chat kind of thing. But if you're feeling that anxiety or that fear about what's coming, increase the productive activities you're doing and it'll go down.
Yeah, absolutely. Another article I found up in Canton, they're doing a whole Lagoon project. Have y'all seen this?
I have not.
Huge master plan Crystal Lagoon project, which new construction is kind of interesting right now, but this, I think, will pull a lot of people north. This was announced a while back, and it's just interesting to keep on the radar. So what do we want the talking point to be, guys?
I think it's understand the stats and develop a strong sense for what impact it has on your life and your business. And this should compel a conversation. You should have easy touches like that before noon every day. It should include talk to 10 of your own past clients, potential clients, and prospects. And in that conversation, go, hey, I was reading a few headlines. Did you know? And throw in some unemployment, maybe a little inflation number, the interest rate number, historical data to overlay to soften the impact of where it's going. And then just say, how's this affecting you? Or have you noticed anything different? And, is affordability a factor in your world right now? And how can I support you? Those are the kinds of questions that really lead to an enhanced relationship and opportunity in the law of reciprocity.
Love it. Jeffrey, you get the final word since you started it.
What he said. I think just don't be afraid to work hard. Come on. It's at the palm of, it's right in front of us of the steps we need to take and the things we need to do. If we were to get wrapped up in where we're headed and what's happening, that anxiousness, like that article was saying, will bog you down. Just work hard. Do productive tasks that are going to lead to more production. Yeah. Don't worry about the rest. Just be productive, and the rest will happen. We see it happen all the time. And know your stats. I'm supposed to say that, right?
One of the tough parts of our industry is when things start to shift like this, there will be agents that'll get out of the business, and it's because they're not following these conversations. They're not working hard. They're not doing the activities. They're just waiting and seeing. And the downside is there's probably some good agents that won't succeed because they don't take the advice of doing the activities and getting into the trench and doing the work. And the positive side of that is those that do will pick up the business that's being missed by those that aren't. And that's just the reality of our world, right? So get in the trench. Activities are everything right now, and get it all done by noon.
And hey, listen, I don't want to minimize the focused energy around calling it work. Our work is talking to people. It's having conversations with people we know, like, and love. It's not that hard to make 20 calls a day if that's all you had to do to survive.
Yep.
So just saying, don't overstate how hard it is. The conversation will lead to opportunities. There's no way around it. Who do you know that I should know that's like you, that if I send them some information every now and then, they might choose to invest or buy, sell real estate? That's after you've had a quality conversation. So get your head around it. It's not that hard. It's just not that easy either. And it just takes focus. And to your point, the 4-hour work week or the 4-hour day, either way, you're going to win if you focus.
There you go. There's your Monday update. Have a good one.